Tonight on The Cycle, a global cyber attack strikes a second time. An immigration agent gets booted from a New York grade school. North Carolina's voter ID law is dead. All that and more coming at you live right now.
Welcome to The Cycle. I'm Aaliyah Jasmine.
And I'm Jacques Slade.
We've just learned that according to the Washington Post, the president revealed classified details about our sources of intelligence on ISIS to Russian diplomats last week. Remember when Russia used to had to hack the U.S. if they wanted classified info? Do you remember that? That was just like a month ago.
Right.
Much simpler times.
Very much simpler times. It's something we'll be keeping our eye on for sure, so we will keep you posted as we learn more tonight and tomorrow. But now, let's get down to today's top 5 stories.
Number 1, thousands of people in Asia woke up today to find their computers unusable after a cyber attack.
This is the same attack that, on Friday, spread through businesses and hospitals in 150 countries. Basically, it's what experts call ransomware. This virus locks you out of your computer unless you pay a fee to the hackers.
It specifically targets machines running on older versions of Windows XP. And yes, even though many of you Apple users out there are younger than XP is, this is still very common in workplaces. If this applies to you, you should update your software, and if you do get infected, do not pay the fee. And please, Windows XP users, whatever you do not take advice from Clippy.
Yeah.
Do you remember Clippy?
I do remember Clippy, the little paper clip thing.
Yeah.
I remember that. All right, number 2, the parents of a Penn State freshman who died of alcohol poisoning during hazing intend to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the school and his fraternity.
The 19-year-old was at the Beta Theta Pi house when he and other pledges were made to drink large amounts of vodka, wine, and beer. Security cameras show him stumbling around, falling down a flight of stairs, and smacking his head on a door before his brothers finally called 911. 12 hours later.
12 hours?
12 hours later.
That's horrible. Okay. A grand jury determined 8 members of the frat, a frat that specifically bans hazing and drinking, will now face charges for involuntary manslaughter.
All right, let's make a big shift to story number 3. A new BBC documentary contends that dinosaurs may have just gotten really unlucky when it came to the whole thing about the asteroid that caused their extinction.
Right. Researchers say that the big rock hit the ocean right at a shallow spot rich in sulfur, leading to the atmospheric winter that caused the dinos to die off. If the asteroid had hit as little as 30 seconds later, it may have crashed into deeper waters and had drastically different results, including the possibility that the dinosaurs may have survived.
I wish they had, because I love dinosaurs and paleontology.
But let's be real though. Like, if dinosaurs were here, we would probably be dead.
So dead. But whatever. Still cool.
All right. Number 4. Yet another horrific death was broadcast on Facebook Live.
This time it was a man who committed suicide by lighting himself on fire at the Memphis bar where his ex-girlfriend worked. The man allegedly had a history of mental illness and domestic violence towards the woman who had taken out a restraining order.
Right. You might remember Mark Zuckerberg announced earlier this month he would hire 3,000 additional workers to screen Facebook Live videos for violence. We're not going to show you the video because it's disturbing, and I'm sure you understand.
And finally, number 5. Immigration agents came to a Queens public school looking for a 4th grader last week, but the school turned them away.
That's right. A new directive from New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio allows school to deny entry to immigration officials who aren't in possession of a warrant, which these ones weren't.
Oh, the Fed's coming to your 4th grade class. Remember when the worst visitor you could get at school was your mom bringing you lunch?
Oh, my God. I have some stories about that.
So bad.
All right. And that's today's top 5.
Okay, but wait. I do have a question about that last story. Is New York really allowed to do that, just openly interfere with immigration enforcement? Is that a thing?
Wow, AJ, funny you should ask. That was a perfectly scripted transition to our next topic. You see, politics can make it hard to get to the truth of a question like that. To help, we have a segment we call here the left, the right, and, well, the truth.
Today we're talking about sanctuary cities. The subject is all over the headlines right now lately, and the opinions on either side are heated. At least 33 states have considered some sort of legislation banning sanctuary cities this year.
But not everyone who's in favor of sanctuary cities is a wide-eyed hippie liberal, and not everyone who opposes them, honestly, is not a snarling racist.
That becomes obvious when you realize that there isn't even an agreed-upon definition of what a sanctuary city is.
That's true. As it turns out, sanctuary city is not an official term, so defining it can actually be pretty tricky. It's like trying to fully explain the meaning of a phrase like on fleek, which no one really knows what it means. I mean, I use it, but I don't know what it means.
No idea. So a sanctuary city is a city that's mysterious and hard to understand, kind of like Gotham City or Las Vegas the morning after your 21st birthday.
I remember that. You're Canadian,
don't
did you?
remember. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
For starters, let's try to agree on a definition of sanctuary city. You can use the term sanctuary city to describe any city that limits the degree to which their local law enforcement officers are allowed to or required to enforce national immigration laws.
Now, there's a pretty broad spectrum here. For example, you have a city like Los Angeles. LA is considered by some to be a sanctuary city because it's had a policy since 1979 that police officers are not allowed to go out of their way to determine someone's immigration status. The left's logic in support of this policy is pretty simple. Immigrants need to be able to interact with the police, whether it's to report a crime or to assist in an investigation, without fear of being kicked out of the country for doing so. Liberals are also skeptical of a law like Arizona's SB 1070, which mandates that state law enforcement officers determine someone's immigration status during a stop or arrest if they suspect that person may be undocumented.
Well, this is controversial because how do you suspect someone is undocumented? Critics say that just leads to racial profiling.
Now, the left also highlights that despite the president's hyperbole, studies show that immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than people born in the U.S. and contribute positively to local economies.
Okay, now it's time for the right side of this debate. Before we get into it, we have to acknowledge that a certain very loud element of the far-right case against sanctuary cities is sourced in simple anti-immigrant hate and even old-fashioned racism. We're obviously not going to dignify that case at all. What we are going to do is lay out the rational conservative argument against sanctuary cities so we can all understand that one does exist. So, a person on the right would probably argue that immigration law is like any other law.
Right.
Either a person is here illegally or they're not. And we should do everything in our power to enforce our laws. There's also the totally legitimate question of whether states should have the right to defy federal law. Imagine we weren't talking about immigration right now. How would you feel if a bunch of cities across the country decided to stop enforcing federal laws against, say, dumping waste into national parks? It's easy to understand the point of view that allowing cities or states to do whatever they want is a recipe for chaos.
Absolutely. But is that actually what's happening with sanctuary cities? That's the question. This is where things get a little bit complicated. There is a law called Section 1373 that prohibits cities and states from standing in the way of federal investigators looking into a person's immigration status. But technically, sanctuary cities aren't doing that. They're merely choosing not to help. It's like a little legal jiu-jitsu to stay on the right side of the law.
Okay, we've heard the arguments on both sides. So what's the truth? It actually comes down to which laws are the most important to enforce. Let me give you something to think about. Since the election, there has been a sharp downturn in reports of sexual assault and domestic violence among Latinos throughout this country. Experts say that people have stopped reporting these crimes because they're afraid of being deported. They're likely scared of ending up like Irvin Gonzalez, a woman who was arrested by ICE agents after seeking a protective order against her boyfriend, who she said was abusing her.
If she lived in a sanctuary city, she would have been free to report those crimes without fear, even if you feel that people should be held accountable for entering the country illegally. It's hard to argue in favor of a system that lets sexual assault and domestic violence go unreported.
And that's today's The Left, the Right, and the Truth.
And finally, we'd like to fill you in on a news story that you might have found to be TLDR or too long and you just didn't read it.
You probably saw this headline today about North Carolina's voter ID law being shot down by the Supreme Court. And sure, the heart of the story is right there in the headline. But what you missed if you didn't click on it is just how important this decision actually is.
The Supreme Court said it will not hear a case from proponents of the law who are trying to keep it alive after a lower court ruled it unconstitutional because it targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision.
North Carolina's Republicans said that they passed the law to prevent fraud, though they didn't provide a single case of in-person voter fraud to back up their argument. Instead, they made it impossible for voters to use public assistance cards as IDs at polls and also ended early voting and same-day voter registration. These steps hit minority voters the hardest, and those voters tend to vote Democrat.
Right. After the 2016 presidential election, there was a wave of questions about why Hillary Clinton lost. Was it her emails, the media, her emails that ended up on Anthony Weiner's computer, Bernie voters, James Comey reopening the investigation into her emails, sexism, possible Russian interference, her emails. Who can possibly say? What wasn't talked about much was the effect that voter ID laws had in key swing states. Take Wisconsin. According to the Associated Press, 300,000 eligible voters did not have proper ID to vote in November. Now, it's not known how many of them would have voted if they could have, but Trump won Wisconsin by only about 23,000 votes. Now you see why this stuff matters.
And that's TLDR. And thanks for watching The Cycle.
And if you have anything you'd like to share, maybe a question about sanctuary cities or an experience with voter ID laws, please hit us up in those comments below. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. Make sure to follow us at The Cycle Live on Twitter and Instagram.
And like, share, subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook, all that good stuff at The Cycle Live.